listening to The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Klein and Janelle Elgaway.
Good evening and welcome to The Doctor's Corner on CAW 360 Network. I'm your host, Janelle Elgaway, and we are here with Dr. Klein. Welcome, Dr. Klein. How are you this evening?
Oh, just dandy.
Good. Tonight we're going to focus on the recent DEA raids on doctors, the FDA filings, pharmacy issues within the opioid crisis, and of course questions from you. So if you have a comment or question for Dr. Klein, please call into the show at 415-915-2291. You can also chat live with our audience on YouTube channel Conspiracies Against Wellness livestream. So, if you don't mind, let's start out by going over what's been going on in the news within the last week.
Well, the news continues to worsen. The opioid crisis, or opiate crisis, that's not really a crisis, has been turned into a horrible crisis. And we're seeing a sweep of un-American activities across the country. We're locking up children because they have brown skin and speak Spanish and are coming begging for asylum. Have people toured the harbor in New York and looked at that huge statue? Mm-hmm. This is what we're about as Americans. And it's bleeding over into the opiate problem with law and order getting worse and worse. We're starting to see the beginnings of a police state. Now, I hate to say that, and I'm not really a politician, but the North Carolina legislature last week passed a law called the HOPE Act.
Mm-hmm. And what is that?
The HOPE Act basically allows the police to access your medical records without a warrant. This is our protection as Americans from a police state. You have to have a warrant to come into my home, my office, search my car, my business, my yard, my swimming pool, anything.
Right.
If the police want to search it, they have to get a warrant signed by a judge. Representative Greg Murphy, Greenville, a Republican, said, "We have gangs coming in from other states that are blanketing the state and are coming up with fraudulent prescriptions, blanketing pharmacies, getting these drugs quickly and quickly moving out of the state." I checked with some pharmacists. They've never heard of this.
Really?
I don't know where he's got it, but this is the kind of language that you see during times of mass hysteria that occurred during the Salem witch trial with hangings, mm-hmm. that occurred during the McCarthy era with communists ruining people's careers and locking some people up. I visited with Representative Joe John today, mm-hmm. a Democrat in District 40, where I live up in North Raleigh, and he attempted to speak up in the legislature and said it's clearly an attempt to circumvent the search warrant requirement, which we've done for years, he said. He was also a judge. This is one little piece at a time. That's how you eat an 800-pound elephant, one bite at a time. That's how you lose your liberty, one bite at a time, said another representative, Michael Speciale from New Bern. So there were people opposed to this, but it passed, unanimously almost in the Republican legislature. Mm-hmm. This is a really serious problem. And to make it worse, I visited Representative John today to discuss a very nasty software program that's being sold by APRIS, A-P-P-R-I-S-S. It's a software company that is now selling a program called NARX CARE, N-A-R-X.
Right. And what is that exactly?
It's a program that will go through patient records. They're going to connect it to the EMR. They're going to connect it to all the pharmacies and all the doctors. And they're going to present what they call, let me see the paper here, a NARX score, a predictive risk score. And the predictive risk is whether or not you're going to overdose. And then they're going to attach it to your medical records. Risk of overdose. How many of those people do you think are going to get prescriptions the rest of their lives?
And what is this based off of? What kind of research have they done on this, of how to find this out?
Yeah, they do the same research that racists did when they went to prisons, said, oh my goodness, look at all these African Americans in prison. African Americans must all be criminals. And that's what they're doing. They're using the CDC data, which is obtained from deaths in the streets from addicts. And they're trying to apply it to the general population that's on these computers that all of our prescriptions now go on.
So every patient basically is going to possibly have, they'll have the score, right? And
you get a score, yeah, depending on how many pharmacies you've been to and what color your skin is. Oops. No, maybe not officially that.
Yeah.
Whether you're taking narcotics or sedatives, and then they give you a score.
Does it actually go into like what you look like too for stereotypes? Like,
it may not. I was just exaggerating. But what they're doing is they're taking every bit of information and they're forming it into these risks of overdose scores that are unscientific. But the states are buying it up, and guess what? North Carolina has bought it.
Oh my goodness.
And it is now part of the data collection system that the police sit behind computers now instead of doing the much harder work of going out and investigating.
Right.
And they've got some company that says, hey, you don't need to do any more police work. Here's a list of people that are going to overdose and become addicts. It's just, it's profiling.
Love It from YouTube asks, doesn't that violate our rights? Can we opt out of it?
No. You can't, because, you see, doctors bought electronic medical records approved by the government for money.
Laura Polk asks, does it include all our DRG codes, too?
Yes, probably, because these computers are set up to gather any information they want. Once they get into people's electronic medical records, there's an interesting thing. I was offered $20,000 by the government to purchase a electronic medical record that they approved.
Huh. What? Recently?
No, this was about 10 years ago when they were starting up all it. So I decided not to, and I have paper records that are now safe, from prying by the police department. And it'd be interesting I just thought of this, for patients to say, doctor, I don't want my records on the electronic medical record. I want you to keep them separately on paper. And I don't know what doctors would say.
Do you have any?
It's the rule.
Well, do you have any ideas of what we can do before this becomes, big and really set in stone for all of us?
That's a good point, Janelle, because when bad things are happening, people tend to stand there with their mouth open. I don't believe this. And what we need to do is make our voices heard. And so we're back to the same old thing of calling up your legislator. Now, they may give you the bum's rush, but, if they get enough phone calls, they're going to start to worry about their next election. So, people need to call up their legislators and say, what's going on with the police being able to look in our medical records without a warrant? Well, what are you people doing? Even though it's been done, that doesn't mean that the general population can't call up people and worry them and say, look, you're an idiot. And if you think I'm going to vote for you, you're mistaken.
Right. Laura Polk from YouTube asks, isn't this an obvious HIPAA violation?
HIPAA, I was visiting a doctor. I was going to chat with him, and on the floor in the waiting room, this was also about 10 years ago, there was a HIPAA law summary that somebody had stepped on. So I picked it up and read it. It was a George Bush thing. It was horrifying. What the HIPAA law is actually an anti-privacy law. What it does is it gives as many people as possible access to your medical files without them notifying you that they're going to look into your medical files, and without telling you afterwards. This includes the police, insurance companies, legislative bodies, state bodies, even included in the first bill, people from fundraising committees. That's how sick it was. The fundraising committees at hospital had access to your medical records without telling you. And that's the way it is now. HIPAA is a big joke. It's got nothing to do with privacy. That's the big lawsuits out west. The DEA was getting into people's files out there, and they said, isn't this a violation of HIPAA? And then they looked at the law, and the law says law enforcement can look at your medical records anytime they want without telling you, because they are, they've got some word for it. You know, you've got the privilege to look into the files. Right. Interesting, when the first law was passed, I called to a hospital to check on a patient that I had sent over there, and they said, well, Dr. Klein, we can't give you any information.
Why not?
What are you talking about? This is my patient. They said, well, the new HIPAA law didn't include doctors.
Okay.
It only included law enforcement, insurance companies, you know, hospital administrators, fundraising committees. So over time, this has just developed into a cottage industry where they have all these meetings and conferences, and you can go and learn about, you know, the best way to take care of patients in a nursing home or hospital is to have the chart right there on the bed, you know, like on MASH. That's the best way, you know. There it is. Everybody, well, oh no, HIPAA privacy laws, can't do that. Somebody might look at it, but it's okay for the police to come and look at it.
Right. Love It from YouTube asks, why do we have to sign it to allow access then?
I'm not sure. That's not true. The HIPAA law is not written that way. I think it's just a phony thing. There's a lot of phony stuff that goes on. For example, I am now, as a doctor, an approved entity. That's what they're called, entities. So I can call over to a hospital and get medical records by just asking. And then they'll pull things like, well, we don't have a signed release. Well, I don't need a signed release. The HIPAA law says, as a doctor, I'm an entity, and I can get this information. Now, oh, no, you'll have to go and contact people in Pennsylvania that we've hired to get access to your patient's x-rays.
Wow.
Yeah. It's hard when things get this bad, you know, not to get really depressed and want to go, you know, out in the woods and live in a tent. But, you know, we got to buck up and do something about it.
Right. And what's crazy, too, is I've heard so many people say they can't even get their own records. Like, they're having a very hard time. Like, they'll keep putting it off, saying they don't have them or they can't get them to them. And they have to keep, you know, staying on them and asking them over and over again. You'd think that you'd be able to get your own records, because I know a lot of people wanted to take your advice and get them and put it on a thumb drive. And several people have said to me, I'm having a hard time getting my records.
Okay, well, this is where you need your family lawyer. They used to have legal aid societies, but they quickly got rid of those. And remember, if you don't have a lawyer, everybody needs a will. So you go to the lawyer and say, how about we draft a little will, you know, for myself and my family. They're usually not too expensive. And then you have an attorney. See, you have an attorney, and then you can call and say, hey, I'm just having a little trouble over here getting my medical records. Would you mind calling them?
Right.
And, you know, family lawyers, that's the kind of stuff they don't mind doing. They charge you for it, but that's okay. You know, and they lawyers always charge for their time. They don't do anything free, which is perfectly okay. But you just have to understand that if you ask lawyers for favors, they're going to ask for a fee in return. So you can always say, you know, how much is this going to cost? Right. Believe me, when doctors' offices get a call from a lawyer, they jump.
Yeah.
This withholding of medical records is punitive. I think the new medicine run by corporations has developed that the patients have become the enemy. I don't know why, if they're, you know, making money for them, but there's a very negative view in this country about sick people. And it's been this way for a long time. We kind of believe that everybody who's sick, it's their fault.
Yeah.
And they actually did a survey of college students, and they asked them, young people, do you think when you get sick with a serious illness like cancer or something, it's basically your fault? And they all said yes, which kind of surprised me. So we've got this attitude in this country. So what you need to do is you just need to be aggressive, politely aggressive. Doctor, can you give me a reason why you're not releasing my medical records to me? Do I not have a privilege to obtain those? Just, you got to just say it. And, when can I have these? I need these.
We have a caller. Ready for some calls?
Sure.
Okay. Caller, welcome to the Doctor's Corner. What's your name and question for Dr. Klein?
Did you say 817?
Yes, it is.
Hi. Hi, this is Teresa, and I went to see my psychiatrist, and the minute I sat down, she attacked me about my medications. And where she got that information, I don't know. But she says she had records that show I had filled a extended release medication, and 3 days later, I had refilled it again. And then several days later, I had refilled it again. And then she said I had filled a prescription for a sleeping pill, and I was taking another medication that was contraindicated. And I said, well, in the first place, and she cut me off. And I said, well, she just kept on yelling at me and saying that she was getting all my medicine, and that,
Teresa,
I was going to be, yeah. Hello?
Just get closer to your phone. There you go.
Get closer to the phone? Got it. Okay, and so she said, she said she was going to, that we were going to have some problems. And I...
Now, Teresa, was any of this true?
No, I don't even get a...
Okay, then what you need to do is you need to stand up and tell the physician that you are being treated rudely and incorrectly, and that you're going to get an opinion from the Board of Registration in Medicine as to whether or not it's proper for a doctor to do this to a person and call them a liar. Stand up and leave.
And I stood up and I said, here's what we're going to do, because she wouldn't talk to me. I couldn't explain anything.
Yeah.
I said, I am going to go to the front desk and I'm going to request my records from the doctor that you were talking about. And I said, I'm going to have them sent to you. And you look them over. Well, actually, I got up and I went to the desk. She threw me out of her office. I walked up to the front desk. I said, give me some forms. I want to file for a release of records. She walked behind me. I said, I'm filing a release of records, so you're going to have all my records, and you're going to see that none of that's true. She said, if I bother to get them. And I looked at
Teresa, you need to end. Yeah, you need to end that relationship. That's a destructive professional relationship. She's being paid by you through an intermediary, but it doesn't matter. She's being paid by you. You need to file a complaint with the State Board of Registration in Medicine. And by the way, they have different names in different states. So if you're Googling them, just Google your state name and then medical board. And you'll get there, and there's a little button you can press on it, and you just file a nice little factual, polite, complaint. Because if people don't file complaints, they're going to keep doing this, and that is a terrible, terrible crime when a professional attacks a sick person.
And, I went to my doctors. I went to every one of my doctors. I walked out that day. I made an appointment with my family practice, pain medicine, and any physician, my orthopedic doctor. And she also accused me of not telling one doctor, any of them, what I was on. So she was saying I was going in and not telling anybody what I was on. So I went to every doctor, paid my co-pay. First thing I said was, can I see my records to see what meds I'm on? They were all there, and I explained what happened. And I said to my family practice, who do I go to for for sleep medicine? I'm confused. He said, you come to me. I said, okay, that's all. So I didn't do anything wrong. He said, no. I went to my pain management doctor, who I knew had it all down, and I said, you know all my psych medicines? And we went over that. He said, yes. I said, so we're good. He said, well, yeah, we're good. Then I went to my ortho doctor, who has never given me a pain medicine, and who also knew what medicine I was on. And it had
Teresa, yeah,
yeah.
The details of this are important to you.
Yeah.
And what you can do is you can write the DEA office in your town and ask them how you can get a copy of your prescription monitoring drug record or prescription drug monitoring record. There is a method that you can get a copy of it, and HIPAA, if people could look this up, maybe share it with Janelle, put it on the website. HIPAA does have a procedure for scrubbing the records of bad information. They don't make it easy, but I definitely would suggest you do that. And I appreciate you sharing this with us, because it's you can through HIPAA
or HIPAA scrubs.
No, through HIPAA. I actually don't know the details, so maybe somebody can help us out by looking it up. But I know there is a method in HIPAA to get into your records and have corrections made. So I don't know how the details, but Teresa, maybe you could find it out and share it with us, because this is a common problem, that wrong information gets on these computers and it's stuck there. Another reason to have your lawyer make a phone call too, to find out how you can get into your medical records. And it's something I'm not sure of. So we need some help out there of somebody that can dig into this and find out how you can, get your records corrected.
Teresa, did you have another question? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes. I have one more question. If I had changed, the reason I didn't change doctors was I was afraid it would, after the way she reacted, I changed doctors, it would be like doctor shopping for someone that I like, or that.
Yeah, that you can get on the computer for that too, but, don't feel trapped. You've got to take the risk that you'll be accused of being a doctor shopper, which you can then try to defend. We need more lawyers to help out with this. But you can't receive terrible medical care either, and feel like you're being hogtied, and you can't do anything. So that's a decision everybody has to make.
Thank you, Teresa, for calling in. We have another caller. Welcome to the Doctor's Corner. What's your question for Dr. Klein?
Hi. Hello?
Hi. Yes, hello.
Oh, hi. This is Julie. I actually know I've spoken to Dr. Klein. I wanted to ask him, I've been calling lawmakers constantly who are involved in anti-opiate laws, and I want to know exactly what should I be asking them, because I tell them my plight, and I tell them what is happening, that we're doctor abandonment, and we're being ruthlessly cut off. I have an incurable disease myself, and I don't know they ask me, what do I want? And I tell them I want a patient's rights bill. I would actually just like them to acknowledge that we exist, because not one lawmaker will even acknowledge this is happening to the incurable disabled. And that alone would be a start, and until somebody acknowledges it, and I don't know how to get any of these lawmakers to admit that this is happening.
They're not. They're all part of the big wildfire that's burning. And the only thing to do is to go in there with more than one person. It's always good to visit your legislator with 2 or 3 people in the same boat, if you can find them, and say, look, we've got this problem. We want a Bill of Rights, and we want you to stop passing laws interfering with doctors' practicing of medicine. So at least you can try to head it off. You can then, it's harder work, but you can try to find out what bills are being considered in the legislature.
I can't even.
Oh, it's just awful. I mean, yeah, but either we can throw in the towel or we can stand and fight, and it's hard, but those are the 2 choices. So
I'm not
it's very discouraging.
I'm going to keep bothering them.
Good for you.
I just want to know. They won't. The first thing I want them to do is at least one, to stand up and say, there has been ruthless doctor abandonment. There has been ruthless cutting off of incurable disabled who have been taking narcotics responsibly for many years, and the doctors have been terrorized by the DEA to stop treating them. And
well, if you go and tell them that, and enough other people go and tell them that, they'll start to get the message. But right now, they believe, yeah. But we got
they know my accent already. They know who I am. They're just, at this point, they're just hanging up on me.
Yeah.
I mean, I've called my own representatives multiple times. I've written them. I've called everyone in the Opiate Committee, everyone in the Senate Health and Pension Committee, Oversight, several times to complain about the CDC and DEA. Nobody, they say they can't do anything. I don't understand it. If this was a nuclear power plant that lied and covered it up, there would be outrage. The CDC has enough biological warfare to destroy humanity, and nobody seems to care that they lied, and they doubled down on the lie. The oversight is completely okay with this. Every single member, I've called them all. I've called Congressman Cummings at least 7 times. They just said, well, there's nothing we can do. I've whistleblowed. I've done everything. Nobody will even ignore. They're just in a standstill. It's a bystander effect I have not seen ever in my life or have heard about. And possibly the Holocaust was the last time when they knew something was happening and nobody said anything and everyone turned the other way. What will break the bystander effect by lawmakers? I understand, I haven't heard the word opiate epidemic in a while, so I think something is changing, but it's not fast enough because there's too many people that are suffering. It's just, they just say, oh, you can find a doctor. They don't understand the medical system at all. They don't.
Well, the other thing beside the legislature, and I would stop going if they're refusing to see you, is to write articles, try to get a local newspaper interested. It could be a small newspaper to get started. And it's always better with more than one person. Get together with a group of people. Groups are much more powerful than individuals. And just start to write this down. And, it's frustrating, but I would stay away from the legislature. And, people can start carrying signs. Every time people carry signs, it gets on the national news. But I understand your frustration. Believe me,
I have my condition because I can't go outside in the daytime.
Yeah,
and it's just too difficult for me. I have to work within my limits, and I do write them. And writing an article, I suppose USA Today apparently has taken some interest. I just feel like maybe I won't stop calling the lawmakers. I feel like some of them are starting to bend, especially in the Senate Health and Pension. At least 3 I've noticed are listening.
All right, well, that brings up an important topic. The FDA, who is in charge of all prescription drugs, including opiates, currently does not have a cutoff. There is no limitation by the people who license the medicines for use. They are going to have a hearing that's closed right now, so many people applied, but they are receiving comments. Right now there's 750 comments. There's 6 to 7 million people being cut off. We need to get a couple thousand comments into the FDA. Now you can go to their website. Everybody's got a pencil. It's easy. It's FDA 2018-N as in Nancy -1621. 2018-N1621. That will get you to the FDA site, and they're begging for people to write in and tell their stories. This is a huge, huge thing. And we got 756. That's peanuts.
It is.
We need to have thousands of comments.
I don't know how to get there. Maybe it's because, like myself, I'm an incurable disabled. I've been hiding it with polite fiction because people don't really like sick people, and it's a hard truth to face. But when I got sick, everyone said, okay, feel better, and gone. I think it's pride.
Well, this would be very important information for the FDA. You go to this website and just tell your story briefly, that here's what happens when a person has a serious disease. And here's what happens when a person has a serious, painful disease and how they get better. And here's what happens when the government recommends people be taken off involuntarily. And by the way, that's nowhere in the CDC regulations. As a matter of fact, they say be careful that you get consent from the patients or else you're liable to get yourself into trouble.
I know.
Okay, so go on the, do me a favor and go on the FDA website and write your story down, and it was nice talking with you.
Okay, and I'm also going to the meeting as well.
Oh, good. So, excellent.
I mean, I'm trying, but it would be helpful if more people joined in. I'm thinking we definitely need more callers. We need more people to call lawmakers. It is crucial at this point. I can't be the only one. Somebody else has to pick up the phone. You just dial the main number of Congress, call anyone in the Energy Committee, anyone in the Senate Health and Pension and Oversight. Those are the three committees right now that are currently designing laws to hurt incurable disabled. We must...
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and we really appreciate your comments. We need to move on to hear other callers.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate it. All right, next caller. Welcome to the Doctor's Corner. What's your question for Dr. Klein?
Is that me on now?
That's it. That's you.
Oh, hi, Dr. Klein.
Hello.
Thank you for being a voice of reason in this confusing time for all of us. I really appreciate your insight on Twitter. Now, I'm with the VA. I'm a veteran. And there is nothing that can be done to change their minds. In fact, I had them writing lies in my records just to prove I needed to be taken off the opioids. They said, you could have 90 milligrams a day, but they just took me completely off.
Do you belong to any veterans organizations?
Not really, and I don't think they really can do much, can they?
Well, yeah, that's the way it works in this country. Groups of people scream and yell. That's how to get things done. So, you might want to look up the Veterans Association and say, hey, what are we doing about this? Large numbers of people, believe me, have a lot more authority than, me visiting my representative today. It was nice I did that, but, it's not going to advance the problem. The VA is covering up suicides, and so large groups of people can make an impact. So I would suggest you look up the veterans, groups
I've got
and join them.
Disabled American Veterans here.
There you go.
So maybe I should go there.
Yeah.
My question is, untreated pain leads to so much stuff, right? And my body, I've been off for over 2 years now, and my body is just breaking down. And I'm starting to think that I have fibromyalgia, but the VA will refuse to diagnose anybody that has a pain condition. They just pat you on the head and say, you're okay, and go on your way.
Well, that's why you need to go to veterans associations and get them going. People need to storm the offices with phone calls. What is going on here? How come you're not diagnosing pain? It's been diagnosed for 1,000 years. What's going on? And people need to start raising their voices and being reasonable, of course. But that's what you got to do. And, what did Martin Luther King do? He He was addressing one of the worst horrors in the history of the world, where an entire generation of people who were dragged here from another continent were then treated like dogs. Now, what do you do? What did he do? He went public in a nice way. And he politicked behind the scenes. And he raised money. And he had people holding up signs that said, "You're treating us unfairly. We're Americans." So that's what we need to do, is study what has gone on before us. The prejudice against people with pain and illness is no different than the prejudice against African Americans, and is no different than prejudice against anybody in this country with dark skin, whether they be immigrants, American Indians, people from the Middle East. It doesn't matter. It's about racial purity, and it goes back a long, long way. But what do you do about it? You study Martin Luther King, because he did it nonviolently, and he did it through the courts. Right. He did it through fundraisers, and that's what we need to do. We need to talk to people from the movement, back in the 60s and 70s, and get some tips, because we're in the same boat. It's so bad that just talking about it, sitting around going, it's really terrible that we can't eat down at the restaurant. So what do? You go sit at the restaurant and get beat up. And that's what they did. And they threw hot coffee on them. But they did it, and in 1964, they won. So we need to do the same thing, and one day we will win. But it's going to be a long road. And we need to
will pass.
Yeah.
But can untreated pain lead to fibromyalgia?
Untreated pain can lead to a lot of things. I would stick to hypertension. Untreated pain leads to high blood pressure, and everybody knows high blood pressure should be treated, and you can't treat it with anything other than treating the underlying cause, which is no pain treatment. This is something simple that doctors can understand. If you talk about fibromyalgia, they're going to, eyes are going to start drooping. But the main thing is hypertension, and I have seen it in many of my patients, who when they get pain control, their blood pressure drops. I mean, this is a bad thing, You're taking me off of medicine, now my blood pressure is going up. Are you going to take care of me when I have a stroke or a heart attack? Then the doctor says, well, I'll give you some blood pressure medicine. Nope. That's not what you do. When you have blood pressure from something else, you treat the underlying cause. If you have a hyperactive thyroid gland, you will get elevated blood pressure, and it's going to be completely resistant to all medicines except treating the thyroid problem. So that's something I would stick with. You say, doctor, I've got this high blood pressure from not being treated with medicines. What are we going to do about this? Am I at risk for a stroke, heart attack, peripheral artery disease with my high blood pressure? And most doctors will start nodding their head, because we're all brought up that way, that you treat hypertension, and it's true, but it's called secondary hypertension. In other words, it's coming from something else, and you treat something else. So I would use that, but you're right. Untreated pain, there's lots of articles on it. It has got a bad effect on people's bodies. This is just horrible. They take people off of medicine that has almost no toxicity. Yes, it can cause addiction, and 4 people per 1,000. That's pretty rare. And you can address that by asking people if they ever had any opiates. But hey, the effects of taking this safe, non-toxic medication away is just absolutely unbelievable, really.
Mm.
So.
Well, thank you for your call. We have another call. Caller, welcome to the Doctor's Corner. What's your question for Dr. Klein?
Hi, I don't know if it's me that you're speaking with.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Klein. I want to thank you for being an advocate for intractable pain patients, first off. And I have spoken with you before. I'm Jennifer Davies. My husband's Andrew Sandler. And one of the things, I was listening to one of the previous callers, the caller before last, that I've discovered when calling politicians, they want written documentation. Then they want you to go in. That's what I find in my state of Washington. And if you wouldn't mind, if I could just say that if there's any folks in Washington, I am taking letters for people that, you know, are having some problems with mobility and presenting them, whether they're from Washington State or New York. At this point, I just want to collect as many as possible. We have a congressman, my congressman, his name is Derek Kilmer. He's been very interested in making sure that intractable pain patients do have adequate treatment. So there is some hope there. I would agree, though, that at this point, we need to take 5 people with us, whatever. Just go talk to our congressman and just be present, because we're in the 11th hour. I am somebody that's been fortunate that I have been tapered a bit, but not very much. I'm fortunate that my medical records were incredibly well documented, but I know that my time is coming. I also am very aware that the national landscape toward intractable pain patients has shifted to a narrative that we are drug addicts, and if we're taking made up 90 morphine equivalents, then we are somehow selling those medicines. So my question to you, Dr. Klein, is I have my appointment with my new pain provider, and how do I have a conversation, because I know he'll want me to taper just because of his hands being tied. How can I resist being tapered?
I think it's time that people say, I disagree with that. And then don't say anything.
Okay.
Just say, I disagree with that.
What kind of pause is that?
Pregnant pause. It's called the pregnant pause. You just say, I disagree with that, and then you pause. And you wait for the other person to become uncomfortable with the silence. And then the person might say, why is that? And then you can give your logical reasons. I have an incurable disease that cannot be treated, and the only thing that I can do to function in life is to treat the pain. And my understanding is pain medicine has got a low toxicity, and my understanding is that anybody who's already taking an opiate will never addict. And then see what happens. You know, just do little chunks. And what you're doing is you're arguing for your rights. You're on the stand. You're Clarence Darrow. You know, you're arguing for your position. So you need to do it logically, unemotionally, which is hard. I advise people to always take somebody to the office, you know, just for moral support, because they've kind of got you, you know. And then you can say, do you know that the CDC regulations warned against doing this without consent of the patients? And that's in there. It's in there that you always have to have a consent of the patient to taper. And say, doctor, have you read the CDC regulations? You know, you can get them on the web just by putting in CDC guideline, and it'll pop up, and then you can read it and look through it and see if you can find anything about forced tapering. There's nothing there. And doctor, if you're taking it upon yourself to force me off a medication without support of the CDC regulations that you claim are behind this, then you are out there legally dangling. Because if you ever get into court and you say, why did you do this to Jennifer? And you say the CDC regulations, and then the lawyer comes over with them and says, show me. Where does it say that? So you took it upon yourself to take somebody off a medication. Do you do this for other medications? Do you take people off their heart medicines, high blood pressure medicines, because they have side effects? You just take people off? And you know what, doctor? I think I'm going to ask for a legal opinion about this. I think you're in dangerous waters. And that's the truth. Have been 2 people. One of them is a psychiatrist at Stanford in their pain group, a woman named Lembke, Lembke, and Andrew Kolodny, who recommended forced tapering. I'm sorry, that's illegal. It's unethical, and it puts people at extreme malpractice risk. If the lawyers would ever get off their duff and help out with these things. You can't do that. You can't tell a patient, I don't care what you say, I'm doing this without your consent. Do you know if I examine a patient without their consent, I can be arrested for assault? Consent's a big deal in medicine. You don't go into surgery without consent. You don't do anything without consent. Doctor, what other situations are there in medicine where something is done to the patient without their consent?
Right.
It's back to the basics, you know. Go ahead.
Yep. If you don't mind, I have another comment that I'm sure will might be a little polarizing, but I have felt that when my rheumatologist, who's in semi-retirement, when I shifted over to a pain provider, one of the things it took me 22 different doctors to find one that would take me, but one of the things I realized was that the prescription monitoring database, they're looking at that ahead of time to see if they'll even take you. So it's being abused, and to me it's being abused in a way without my consent. I don't think the Drug Enforcement Agency should even have access to it, let alone the police now. So I find that when and of course I'm in Washington, which is really a harsh state, but when we're calling to, see if somebody will take us, they look us up immediately before we even step in the door. And I have,
Jennifer, that might be a little project for you and some other people to just quietly call the regional ACLU office and say, we would like to come and present our case about the violation of our civil rights. And we cannot get medical care in this country because they have profiling computers that doctors check first that we do not have access to. This is gross. I do. This is gross profiling.
It is.
See, what profiling, here's the way profiling works. You have a bunch of black folks in prison because they made laws to nab them on purpose. And so then you say, oh, gee, we got so many African Americans in prison, all African Americans must be criminals. See, that's the thinking. In other words, people die on the streets from heroin overdoses because they're taking a benzodiazepine, of course, in enormous doses, right? So therefore, Jennifer, who's taking a pain medicine and a benzodiazepine, gets on the computer as a risk for overdose. This kind of stuff is really basically unconstitutional. You cannot profile people in the United States of America.
I don't know. Like, I have proof in one particular situation because I had made an appointment. They went ahead and accepted it. They were going to send me paperwork. I called back. They went, oh, we're just not taking any more patients. And then I got the person to admit, that's indeed what happened. So
perfect. You got one case, Jennifer. That's all it takes. One case. The American Civil Liberties Union needs a case. That's how they get started. They don't do things out of the blue. They have to have a case. So you've got the case, you see. In other words, that's enough evidence that they can follow up on it, and then they can find out more information about the Brandeis University, a famous Jewish university named after one of the most liberal justices ever, Louis Brandeis. And they are taking money from DEA to develop these drug monitoring programs with red flags. And they send out reports called unsolicited reports. Are you ready for this? What a euphemism for tattling.
Right.
Unsolicited report. So they send out these unsolicited reports behind the scenes, and just what you said is what's happening to people. You are being denied health care because of a computer surveillance and profiling computer. And to me, if I was in the American Civil Liberties Union, I'd just leap up off my desk, and get something going.
I've tried.
Worth a try, go with a couple people yeah.
It's a big problem because we can't even get doctors I've been fortunate, but I know my luck will run out as well. But we can't get doctors because, like I said, they're profiling us even before we walk in the door. And I'm also, my background is in IT, so I see really how this is, my mind sees exactly how they're doing this. And so I have one other question. Why I feel like there was initially a lot of buy-in from doctors with this whole new 90 morphine equivalent, just from the physicians I've spoke with. And I also am wondering why there was so much buy-in, if you perceive it that way, and why some doctors that are good doctors that have not had patients, overdose and that have been treating patients for decades, why are some being targeted? Why others are not?
Well, the DEA is operating under the instructions of the Attorney General. Doctors were first arrested in 1915 by the federal government misinterpreting a law, the Harrison Act. It was overturned 10 years later. It was too late. Doctors have been arrested in the 30s and 40s, and it's just a long string because we hand out the devil's opium, and they're going to keep after us until we do something about it. As American citizens, we have a government by the people, and sometimes it takes a long time, long time is not zero time. You just got to hang in there and work on it. Jennifer, it sounds like you have a good idea, and also you can contact me privately. I've got more information on the Brandeis stuff.
Okay,
Dr.
I have stuff too. So.
All right.
No, that's okay. I just had a question because you mentioned that doctors they have patients that overdosed. Do the majority of doctors actually have patients that overdose, or do most never see that?
That's a good question. I asked 3 pain medicine doctors. All 3 of them have been practicing more than 30 years, so that's 100 years seeing nothing but pain patients. Mm-hmm. And I asked them, how many overdoses have you seen in your 30 years? Guess what? 0.
Wow.
0 amongst the 3 doctors. I asked them, how many of you have seen hyperalgesia? This supposedly your pain gets worse taking medicine. Mm-hmm. 0. How many of you have had people become addicted? That was a little fuzzier. People,
like once they're on it?
Quite how to answer once they're on it.
Okay.
And nobody could really think of any. So I would say the answer is almost 0. Because biologically, once you're on the medicine and you're not addicted, you never will become addicted because you don't have the gene. And you will never get high on opiates. You can get high on marijuana, cocaine, alcohol, amphetamines, but you won't get high on opiates. That's a big misconception. If people go out and seek opiates to get high, no, they don't. People who are addicted will get extremely high off opiates, but only those carrying the gene. And that's only 1 in 250 people.
Jennifer, did you have any other questions for Dr. Klein?
No. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for being able to do what a lot of physicians are not willing to do. But also, I will have to criticize my own community for. I know we're all sick. I'm deathly sick myself, but we really do have to write letters with our address and our phone number, and we have to get those out. It's very important. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
You're welcome, Jennifer. Dr. Klein, Aaron Sells from YouTube. Just afraid my doctor will drop me or suggest I find another doctor if I push for my rights. Does Dr. Klein suggest we have a backup doc before trying to talk about my treatment plan?
Yes, that's a very good question. In other words, what you can do is, see, here's what doctors don't like. I'm here today, doctor, because I've run out of my medicine and I don't like my other doctor. Can you fill it?
Mm-hmm.
What is nice is to go in and say, I'd like to have a little talk with you if you don't mind. And I am unhappy with my pain management, and here's why I'm unhappy. And here's my story. I was diagnosed with this. I was treated with adequate pain medicine. It changed my life. I was able to do this, this, and this. Then I got taken off without my consent for no reason, in addition to, and then list the other problems with the other doctor. And I would like you to consider treating me and helping me with all of my issues.
We have another question. Can you speak to checking for this gene, this addiction gene? Can you talk about it?
Yeah, they've been the brain scientists have been working on this for quite some time. Even NIH says that this is a genetic malformed or malfunctioning receptor in the brain. So there's pretty much universal acceptance in the scientific community. This is really a brain disease. So they've been trying to track down the genes. It's hard because it's humans. You can't just grind up their brain and look at it under the microscope. So they have been diligently working, and they started off with one gene, identifying it, 2 genes, then it was 14 genes over in England, now it's 18 genes. As soon as it gets to the point that you got enough genes identified, then you can do a genetic test. And there's a company in California that's trying to market this, a couple of companies trying to market this. It's going to be about 80% effective, and while they look for even more genes, see, the more genes you get, the more accurate it gets. It's a long, arduous process, but yes, there's going to be a genetic test.
Great.
And that will prove that people do not have the ability to become addicted. If what everybody says about all the prescriptions that are written, blaming doctors, and we prescribe more than anybody else in the whole world, you would expect a lot more people to be addicted, and they aren't.
Right. And that number hasn't gone up or gone down.
It hasn't changed since 1920. We have the same percentage of people addicted, and the rest will never become addicted. People are afraid when they're on the medicine they're going to become addicted. Nope, not going to happen.
Now, say if you do have the gene, and once they can do this, are you automatically going to be addicted if you take pain medication? And yes. What if you need
more than likely? And then under controlled circumstances, what you can do is take a test dose and find out if you're going to, go on this celestial experience. And then if you do, that's confirming that you have the addiction disease. And then you approach it as a disease like diabetes or anything else. And we don't need to get into the details. But once it's identified, then you can say, okay, here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do. And you're going to need to avoid, these medicines because you're going to feel so good that you don't really want to do anything else in life. I mean, that's the kind of experience you have when you have these genetic predispositions to addiction.
Now, when we talk about addiction, if you have an addiction gene, does that mean just for opioids, or is it across the board, cocaine, alcohol, whatever?
Okay, right now the current thinking is if you have addictive genes, it's only for 2 things, possibly 3 actually, opiates, nicotine, and some forms of alcoholism where a person needs alcohol continuously, not the weekend binger or whatever. A lot of receptor disease alcoholics don't even get drunk that much. They just maintain their addiction. No, the other, if you are addicted to cocaine or marijuana or amphetamines, there's not the same receptor disease. There are pathways and there's biochemistry, so it's a real addiction. Somebody who smokes marijuana every day for 2 years is obviously addicted, but they can stop. Mm-hmm. A person, so we call that addiction A.
Right.
Addiction B, which is the opiate and nicotine addiction, people cannot stop. It's a brain-driven thing. It's weird. It's a brain-driven disease.
All of these, addiction houses, and they're getting a lot of money to help the addiction world from government grants and stuff like that. Why isn't there any research on this? Like, why aren't they putting something like this out?
Too much money. I mean, if I ran an addiction house and had 10 people in it and then got some cheap motel and put them in it and got a couple of doctors and get $1,000 a day.
Yeah. That's
the standard fee. There's so much money in addiction treatment and there's no standardization.
Mm.
I can just set up any kind of program I want. I could wear a pointed hat and do incantations. Nobody has any rules about it. The whole treatment industry needs to be completely scrapped and start over. It always has to offer patients medication-assisted treatment, always. It can also offer blockers. It can help people if they really want to try to do it alone, which fails 90% of the time. Mm-hmm. But people need a choice of what kind of program they want. Do you want tough love program or do you want a nice, quiet, kind program? Mm-hmm. And talking to people with heroin addiction, it seems to be that some people need a tough program and some need a kind program. So people need to have the choice. And I think it should be done maybe a short-term inpatient stay just to get you away from your social environment, because even addiction B, which is a true heroin addiction, still has a behavioral component. You're around all your friends that do nothing but shoot up, and you're not in a normal society. You're now in a shunned sub-society that's shunned from the rest. And so people get together for support, so you got all those problems. But, yeah, the rehab industry needs a complete overhaul.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to wrap up here. Any closing words for the evening?
FDA 2018-N as in Nancy 1621. Get your comments in there. They're listening to chronic pain patients.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Klein, for joining us this evening. Will you be here the next Tuesday or no?
No, next Tuesday I'm going to be at the FDA meetings.
Okay. All right, great. Well, we can't wait to hear what you have to say about those the week after then. Well, I appreciate you coming on this evening, and good luck next week.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Well, Call Nation, thank you so much for joining in. Great questions, great comments on YouTube tonight. Tomorrow we'll be running a previously aired show. And I again want to just thank you, Call Nation, and Dr. Klein for joining us on another Tuesday evening at the Doctor's Corner. I'm Janelle Elgoy signing off for the evening. Until next time, have a good night.
You've been listening to The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Klein and Janelle Elgoy. Copyright 2018 by EXG LLC. All rights reserved.